Ready for a teaser? Okay, there is no teaser because I left my hard drive at home and now I have to re-record my original intros and outros on iPhone earbuds for the final podcast of 2019. I tell you, this year, in a lot of ways, was a one-way train to Bummerville. But Sonia Hamer, she joins me this week and we talk about a piece she wrote for Creative Nonfiction's True Story called Pig, an Essay. But first, this is CNF, the greatest podcast in the world. And let's hear from that flagship sponsor. Discover your story with Bay Path University's fully online MFA in Creative Nonfiction Writing. Christine Brooks recalls her experience with Bay Path's MFA faculty as being filled with positive reinforcement and commitment. They have a true passion and love for their work. It shines through with every comment, every edit, and every reading assignment. The instructors are available to answer questions big and small, and it's obvious that their years of experience as writers and teachers have made a faculty that I doubt can be beat anywhere. Don't just take her word for it. Apply now at baypath.edu/MFA. Classes begin January 21st. You know what else sponsors this podcast? My monthly newsletter. This is going to be real important heading into 2020, so you need to heed this house ad and subscribe to the newsletter at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, once a month, maybe more. We'll keep it once a month for now. No spam, can't beat it. All right, I'm going to say something real controversial here. Star Wars was awesome. I loved it. Got it? Huh. Well, okay, this is CNF, Creative Nonfiction Podcast, where I talk to badass people about the craft of telling true stories. I'm your host, Brendan O'Mara. Hey. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and consider leaving a little love over on Apple Podcasts. Let's hit 100 ratings and reviews, man. I hope I've made something worthy of your time and worthy of your endorsement. It means a lot coming from you. Reach out via email, creativenonfictionpodcast@gmail.com, if you have any questions or concerns. Sonia Hamer, today's guest, the last of 2019, wrote an essay that is so multi-layered and multifaceted that I'm not entirely sure how she did it. I know I could never write anything quite like it. Not in a million years. Certainly, maybe in a million. I would say maybe in a million years I could, but realistically, it's just, we're not going to get there. I'm gonna fall far short of a million years of age. Hence, if you can't do interview, right? It's a great piece. What can I say? Anyway, I hope you had a nice holiday doing whatever it is you do. This is the last part of the year. Lots to reflect on. I hope you take time to reflect a bit also and hone your goals and sharpen your focus. That's a big thing I'm trying to do this year. So, but above all, as you reflect, set those goals, go easy on yourself. Advice I'm trying to take myself. Hard to do, but worth trying to heed, if you know what I mean. Enough from me, man. Sonia Hamer is here. She's going to close out 2019. She's the hammer of the year. Hammer? No, it's just Hamer. Here she is. Huh. Cool. Well, I think we should dive right into your essay and true story and just go from there. I love your very short opening paragraph, which talks about the passing of your grandmother, and then the final couple sentences go, 3.5 months have passed, life has gone on. That's where the pig comes in. So take us to that moment of adopting this pig, and what it does to your life essentially.
Yeah, so it was just a sort of a strange moment where I think I was spending some time with my dad, and this sort of standard thing where we don't always we both care about each other, don't always express it well. And I forget how pigs came up, but he essentially found out that one could adopt a pet pig, at some point, and it went on for a few weeks, and it was a joke that became a living pig. We were both at turning points in our lives, respective and very different turning points, because there's quite a few years between my father and I, and but I think that was a way for both of us to, I hesitate to say deal with what we were feeling. It was probably more of a way to not deal with what we were feeling, but to not deal with it together, in sort of a joint action.
So why a pig versus any other dog or any other animal?
I think it's just the strangeness of it. Yeah, the eccentricity was appealing. The outrageousness, yeah. You just sort of definitely a bad reason to bring an animal into your life. The joke that went too far, but
I wonder too. So you said like getting this pig essentially was in a way a way for you and your father to not deal with what was going on in front of you. What has is that how your relationship has always been with your dad?
I feel like a lot of relationships have like some external object that they latch onto as a way, like, for both parties to prove the relationship matters to them. And there've been like a number of those objects over the years. Like there's this country singer named Kinky Friedman who you've probably never heard of, but he's sorry, that was a hipster thing to say, but yeah, he's just a strange Texan. He's run for governor a couple times, and he's his whole thing is he's a Jewish boy from West Texas, and my dad really latched on to, he got found like a CD of his somewhere and like latched on to Kinky Friedman, and I was about 10 at that time, so I latched on too, and that was like something we could both come to together, is Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys. So yeah, I would say that there's always been that element there.
Well, yeah, I think fathers in particular, and I don't suspect that this is uncommon with like mothers and children as well, but oftentimes I think it has more to do with fathers. It's like with sons, oftentimes it's sports, and like that's their way of communicating with their kids. They can't say anything direct because that would show some sort of vulnerability, but oftentimes you can talk through sport. And so I suspect with you and this musician, but also this pig too in this essay, this is a way for you guys to convey various messages without actually having to come out and say it directly, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's 100%. It's our football, I guess. It's funny that you mentioned the opening of the essay, because that is not the opening I would have chosen on my own, and it's not the opening I originally sent to Creative Nonfiction magazine.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah.
What was the original one?
Let's see. I think it was a line that I was just way too attached to. It was like, when my grandmother died, my father bought a pig.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how the essay started. So I ended up being so attached to it that I couldn't see that it didn't really work as an effective opening or lead to an effective opening for the essay. And so I owe a lot to the editor at True Story for really pushing me to, we need to figure out a way to open this essay, and it might look like cutting out some of the stuff you have and moving this paragraph up here. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because
that's cool. I even in an essay I had published with in the Quarterly a couple years ago, I had this sort of irreverent, throat clearing, maybe first 200 words that, but they accepted it anyway because Hattie could see that there was something good there, and we cut all that out. So what was that like for you, like being edited in this piece? The fact that they accepted it for this, even though your original, like they could see the good in it, even though it needed some work. Like, what was that like for you working through those kind of edits?
I mean, it was an amazing experience, because I've never had that happen before. Like, I've never had an editor care enough about my writing to try to make it so much better. And so I was just so blown away by what Hattie helped me see about this essay, and how she helped me push it beyond what I had sent in. Yeah, I think it was a very educational experience that like I can carry forward. You know, it just taught me a lot about writing, and it taught me a lot that I can use as an editor myself.
Yeah, it working with a really good editor like teaches you. It kind of, what does it do really? It kind of lets you know that these things are fluid, and it takes like a lot of work, and there's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into making something read really fluidly and smooth, and that it's okay to have sort of herky-jerky early rougher drafts. And if you have an editor with a good eye, that you can you can mold it, you can shape it, and it can still come together beautifully. But it was definitely, radically different than what you thought was this beautiful idea when you submitted it. So it's like it's kind of inspiring to know that things can be really labored over and worked over to get to something that is, readable and fun and artful.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's it's definitely comforting that you can, because the idea that something just comes out fully formed and is perfect is way more intimidating than the idea that you can put work into it, and you can get help from other people to try to make something publishable.
Yeah, I used to think that about Hemingway's work early on, like when I was in my, when I was just starting to take on writing seriously, and I was like really obsessed with him especially, and it just read his work was so tight and lean, and it was so easy to read that it made it feel like it wasn't labored over, and that it just came out like that, and that was, like you were saying, kind of intimidating. But now, like once you're in this long enough, you realize that you can really labor and tinker over this, and it comes out through the work, and so you don't have to be as intimidated. You have to realize that even the masters that we think it just comes out fully formed, it's like, no, it's anything but. If anything, they're going through 40 and 50 drafts to get it just right.
And I mean, like the Great Gatsby too, with Fitzgerald. I mean, that's another book that's like really lean, but completely like owes so much to its editor. And there's just I think most pieces of writing I think about are like that. Either the writer themselves like edited them in a very labor intensive way, or they had a great relationship with an editor that helped them work through it, or both.
I reread Gatsby every single year. Like it's a top 5 book for me. Yeah, I read it every now about this time of year in December. I always reread it. It for that reason. It's so lean and good, and it's really funny, and the writing is beautiful. It's unlike anything I could ever write, and that's good because it's just not my style per se. But I love it for the story, the leanness, and even though it's a novel, it's in effect a memoir, and so it is very nonfiction-y, even though it's a novel. So I'm always coming back to it.
Yeah, I mean the faux memoir genre is really interesting. Like that sort of first-person narrator stance. Like I just started reading Moby Dick for the first time, and it also has like that famous sort of effaced narrator, but not effaced. Caraway. You've got Ishmael sort of watching and narrating, and it gives it that layer that you're more familiar with in personal essays or narrative nonfiction. It's interesting why our brains latch on to that mode of storytelling.
It could be that the narrator, when that's done really well, it feels like they're a true stand-in for you as the reader, in an unobtrusive way. Like they're there observing this thing and reporting back to you, and they're not getting in the way of the story. They're just kind of there observing on your behalf. And I feel like my favorite memoirs and my favorite essays, I'm kind of blanking on some of the exact ones, but my favorite memoirs are always the one where the narrator is looking outward and is actually telling someone else's story above their own. And just like Gatsby as a model, like I think that is, if you can write a memoir that's like that, to me, that is like the gold standard. And that's just my taste, but that's just where I gravitate towards. Is that something you really like too? Like you were saying, like we kind of latch on to that. Do you like that mode of storytelling?
I definitely do, but I also appreciate like when the narrator has a very strong presence and voice, and I think that persona can also be an important tool in writing. It just depends on what story you're telling and what job you're trying to do with the writing.
There's a David Foster Wallace essay, a very long title, profiling Mike Joyce, this tennis player from like the mid '90s.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
Yes, yeah. Is that in Consider the Lobster, or is that in a different collection? He has several collections of his essays.
Yeah, that one's in Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again.
Yes, okay, yeah. The cruise ship essay, right? Is that
yeah, that one, that's the lead essay, I think. Or actually, no, I think it's towards the back, but that's what it's named after, the cruise ship essay. And but yeah, that profile on Mike Joyce, where you've got the pyrotechnics of his writing style, but he's also basically profiling how hard it is to break through on that upper tier of tennis. And then of course this player, Mike Joyce. So it's like, it's outward looking, but it also has just such kinetic language that it just pops off the page. So there's a great balance of voice and looking out.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And he also has like a profile of John McCain that is not, I think, is not quite as formally, it's not quite as Wallace-y, because I think he was writing it for like a major news outlet of some sort that I don't remember, but
yeah, Rolling Stone,
yeah. Really, probably a very difficult balance to achieve. I can't say I've tried it myself, but I can imagine it being just agonizing.
Yeah, I've tried it, and it's hard to imitate that, because when you imitate it, it comes off trying way too hard. Because there are some people who are so singularly unique. That's redundant, of course, but they are just on their own plane, and if you try to imitate them, it's like, oh yeah, you're just trying to be that person. So I've gone through that of trying to be really like funny and witty and verbose and using footnotes, and it's just like here it's pointing the finger too much at myself, and that's just ultimately not who I am and not where my strengths lie. So I just have to pivot and go elsewhere with my taste. But it's but yeah, sometimes you gotta like fuck around like that. You gotta go and imitate people and just straight up copy their style and see if it works. I know you've read widely with like Maggie Nelson and I think Rebecca Solnit and some other people. Like who are some people similarly that you try to kind of emulate to try to reach your own style?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm reading this memoir called The Undying right now by Anne Boyer, and she's a poet, and she does this sort of lyrical weaving together thing, but she also she doesn't hold herself back from like maybe more analytic statements as opposed to just focusing solely on images. And I think I find that really compelling in her writing, and I found myself doing it sort of unconsciously. Maybe it would be a good exercise to just call a spade and do it on purpose. Yeah, it's a bit like people in art school have to like paint in the style of certain artists at some point. They'll like have projects where they're like paint something like Cezanne or like Picasso, and I guess that just that exercise of trying to imitate teaches you a lot.
Yeah, you've got to do that. It's the only way you'll come to anything that is semi-original, or at least something that feels like it's coming from like your core. And who knows, there's probably a million Banksy imitators out there, but those people will eventually come to their own style of street art, or maybe they'll take the street art and somehow juxtapose it against like gallery stuff, and they'll come to their own thing by just taking all those influences. It's the only way. And then you put it together and you boil it, you reduce it down, you season it appropriately, and then there you go.
Yeah.
Sonia's soup.
Sonia's soup. I'm not sure I want if that's the soup of the day, I'm not sure I want it, but yeah, I think that we talk about creating, but really most art is fundamentally like synthetic. It's an exercise in synthesis of influences and, you know, experiences. So, or like, yeah, I guess I use the soup metaphor too. I like to say the crock-pot. Like, I like to think about my brain as a crock-pot, and like you throw everything in there and you let it sit for a while.
Well, that's a perfect metaphor in a lot of ways too, because it embedded in that is, you know, 8 to 10 hours on low heat. You know, it's
Yeah.
right. So it's like you have to be patient with a lot of this stuff. It's not going to come out in like 30 seconds in the microwave. You have to have the confidence that you've put the right ingredients down. And then sometimes these things just have to sit and percolate and marinate and just bubble together and get tender for a long, long time. And then it's ready. And then it's like, okay, all that time was worth it.
Oh yeah, but I mean, during the 8 hours, it's not so easy to just sit there and be like, yeah.
Yeah, you want to tinker with like, oh, this is starting to smell good, but I don't know. Like,
Maybe
I want this thing out.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe it's ready to serve, but then you bite into it, or someone else bites into it, and you're like, oh no, it's very red in the middle.
Oh man, that's great. I love it. That's such a perfect metaphor. And it's definitely probably going to be in the title of this episode. So it's like Crock-Pot
Red in the
Prose.
middle. Crock-Pot Prose. I like that. Just throw everything in and let it sit there. Yeah, I mean, I guess coming back to like having an editor really work through your essay, like that is the feeling where you send it out and it's still pretty bloody in the center. And there, if you see, like, it's really nice when an editor, despite that like undercooked nature, sees, you know, oh, this could be really good. Why don't you stick it in the oven for just a little longer? You know,
Right.
It's a great feeling. Yeah.
So as you were writing Pig in Essay, which I love the title too, was that always the title?
Yeah, that was that, and the first line I was very attached to were what came to me first. So
Nice. So as you're writing this, like this essay has, I mean, you look at the title and you're like, oh, this is going to be some very cute essay about an animal, and oh man, I hope this animal doesn't die at the end. But this is so multi-layered with the relationship with your dad, of course, the pig, your history with bulimia, sexual assault. There's the death of your grandmother. There's just so much in this essay. How did you balance all of those things so it actually felt cohesive?
So after we talked about this last time, I went back and found my notebook from when I was writing Pig, because I finished it over 2 years ago now, so it's been a while. But what I was relying on at the time very heavily was something I learned from a teacher of mine, Lacey Johnson, who's, you know, also a great writer, a great nonfiction writer, and a great influence. But she really enjoys talking about triangles when she's trying to explain how to write essays and balance essays. And so one of her triangles is mania, mystery, mastery. So if you like, each of those goes at a point on the triangle. So the narrator of the essay has like a mania that they're obsessed with, a mastery, like some sort of subject material that they have a grasp over and they use throughout the essay as a lens, and mystery, which maybe is like the underlying questions that the narrator is in the process of trying to figure out. So I used that triangle. I'm not sure how effectively I used it, because I don't know that each element of the essay would map exactly onto that model. But the other thing that I was thinking about was the idea that what defines a lyric essay, at least for me, is that there's some sort of epiphany through the synthesis of these things. So like at some point all the strands come together and there's some sort of turning point or change or epiphany or whatever, emotional alteration, whatever word you want to use. And so I was thinking about the essay as being organized around that, around whatever emotional realization I came to in the process of these events.
And was that epiphany in this piece when you were kind of pulling back what your grandmother had gone through and trying to show that to your father, to what he was kind of avoiding the whole time?
Yeah, and I think so. And I mean, it's interesting because, like, as I was working on this essay, I brought what I was working on in the essay back into my own life, and it resulted in a lot of conversations with my dad about, like, why he was angry at her, what I thought about the things that I had read about her life. And there's still a lot I haven't told him or talked to him about. But there was a feedback between the essay and, like, my life and my relationship with my dad and what I was at least trying to talk to him about. And I also think that the essay gave me a way to work through things, like, maybe in a less, well, I don't want to say less destructive, because I don't really know what the repercussions would be if he read that essay. But it gave me a way to work through and think about the mess inside of me without, like, maybe putting the mess onto him. And I think it let me see him a little more clearly and accept maybe, some of the ways in which we're both a little limited. I think the emotional epiphany was just that there's that these feelings are there. So is a lot of love and affection, and all of these things can coexist in some manner.
There's a passage partway through that you write, "My father's words leave me furious. How can he let his adolescent anger be so blinding? That jerk, that dick, that fucking piece of shit. His thoughtlessness, I feel, feeds my silence." And of course, you go on a little bit, and I wrote in the margin there, just like as a question that I want to ask you, like, how hard was that to write, for you to go into that, to be that raw? How hard was that to approach that?
Pretty difficult. There's definitely a big impulse to hold back from emotions like that in writing, especially when people you care about are involved. I think the thing that helped me through it was, I remember that particular section because I remember, again, Lacey suggesting that I use an uncharitable reading and then a charitable reading way of approaching that section. So I have, an angry paragraph and then a more charitable paragraph under that. And so I do think that the those two work together for me, like, both in the essay and emotionally, that, like, having this more charitable interpretation helped me give myself permission to be more emotionally raw, I guess was the word you used, and open in the section above it.
Yeah, and like, you close out that paragraph too, like, it's just this very visceral thing, and all day my rage leaves me breathless, leaking and shaking as pig's delicate toes click across the floor. So even as, like, you're in this raw, visceral rage, the end of this paragraph is just this little playful TikTok of the pig clicking across the floor, which of course is sort of the connective tissue between you and your dad in a lot of ways. So it really is this wonderful sort of juxtaposition of this anger versus this sort of oblivious little pig, well, big pig at this point, walking across the floor.
Very big pig. Yeah, I mean, I guess not for a pig. He's not very big, but no, I mean, I think it's helped a lot by the fact that a pig is it's a really intelligent animal. It's also a slightly ridiculous animal. And, it's an animal we're not used to seeing in certain contexts. So, yeah, just it was a very useful tool to have at sort of critical emotional junctures.
Yeah, and it's nice that it kind of provides levity in the essay too, because anytime the pig pops in, it relieves some of the tension in a way.
Right. Yeah, which is, what the pig did in real life too, right? He gave us something to focus on and talk about. So probably writing it that way came pretty naturally, because that's, how I experienced it and how we use the pig functionally. Yeah.
And later in the essay too, you also write, and this might be a good time to ask you, given that you have probably a good 2 years distance from the Sonia that wrote this and the Sonia you are today. You wrote that I can't remember a time when I felt safe in my flesh, and I'd extend to you, like, are you any closer to feeling safer in your own flesh? How has that progressed for you?
Yeah, I've come a long way. With the eating disorder, like, is in the body dysmorphia is all much better. I mean, that stuff sort of never completely goes away, I don't think, but I'm a lot farther away from it, which is a really nice breather because it's not a good headspace to be. And yeah, I mean, part of my process of maturing has been to trust my agency a little more about my body and my decisions. And I definitely have come a lot closer to feeling in control of that and embracing that. I think there's still certain things that are difficult, like just navigating relationships when you have like self-esteem or boundary issues, or all of these issues that can come along with certain things. Like it's just a very ongoing process.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've learned a lot, and I have a lot more tools. So
That's great. And as we wind down here, Sonia, I wonder for listeners out there who might be struggling with a piece of work they might be just toggling around with, maybe, given that Pig to me is a very fearless essay. Like it comes from a place of fear and desperation in a lot of ways. I feel, at least that's how I read it, and you wrote through that and got here, so you had to be unbridled and fearless. So maybe, given that you've had that experience with this, for people who might be struggling with that, how might you advise them to be more unbridled and to lean into that fear to get the best thing on the page for them?
I mean, I think probably to at least try and let go of the all the I can't do this, for whatever reason you say I can't do this because it will hurt this person, or because this isn't a thing I should be talking about, or it will make people think this thing. Like to constantly be talking back against those reasons that your brain comes up with, because they're always going to come back and crop back up, and you just have to it's a constant process of saying no to them, or saying that like something else is more important. That's helpful. I mean, I think also just having a strong base in the rest of your life, like having a strong accepting network or people that you can go to talk about maybe not your writing, but like what you're struggling with emotionally, can be really helpful with writing that's very close to you, and sort of giving you a place to rest, so that you have the emotional energy to come back to whatever you're working on, and fight back mentally against your anxieties or your fears or your worries.
I dig the tight 30 CNFers. Sure, you can't quite dig as deep on some tactical matters, but maybe there's ways I can still shoehorn in some goodies in a tighter package. Right, that's the Black Album nature of the next phase of the podcast. Same power, tighter package. Because this is why I know an hour is a big ask when you've probably got 10 other podcasts and Netflix and Baby Yoda and homework and reading and romantic love to engage in. The more I think of it, putting out a show longer than 30 minutes seems downright rude and maybe even selfish. How dare you? Subscribe to the newsletter, friend. There's good stuff coming to subscribers. Once a month, no spam. Can't beat it. BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey. If you deem the show worthy of sharing, link up to it on social media. You can tag me and the show at CNFPod. As you know, scaling back on social media. Heard. So, if I don't give you those mad props, and fist bumps right away. That is why. So in any case, like I said, last pod of the year. Can you believe it? We've made it another year doing this hot mess of a podcast. It is time to go. We will just keep rolling into 2020, man. So let's do this, CNFers. Happy New Year. This train doesn't stop, because if you can't do interviews, see ya.